She chose the rancher over her tribe. What she did next no one expected. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Let's dive into today's story. The sun was setting over the vast expanse of the west, casting long shadows over the dry plains. A lone figure stood at the edge of the horizon, the silhouette of a rancher, rugged and solitary, his boots sinking into the dirt as he surveyed the land that had been his life for years. This was Thomas Holt, a man who had built his world from scratch. His ranch, a patchwork of fences and scattered barns, stood as a testament to his resilience. But his quiet life was about to be disrupted. Far from where he stood, in the heart of the Apache Nation, a decision was being made that would change everything. Amara, the daughter of the tribe's leader, had always known her place among her people. Fierce, loyal, and proud, she had been raised to uphold the traditions of her ancestors. But something about the endless cycle of battles, the constant struggle for survival, made her question her future. Then, one fateful day, she met Thomas Holt. The first encounter was unexpected. Amara had been sent to gather supplies at the nearby trading post, a journey she had made countless times. But this time, the winds of fate pushed her toward the rugged rancher. He was a man who did not fit the mold of the usual settlers. There was no anger in his eyes, no hatred in his heart. When they spoke, it was with a strange understanding, as if they were two lost souls in a world that had forgotten them. His calmness, his respect for the land and the people around him, contrasted sharply with the aggression she was used to from those who came from the outside world. Their conversations grew longer, their meetings more frequent. Amara found herself drawn to him, something she had never felt for anyone before. He was a man of honor, yet he had no allegiance to the tribe, no deep-rooted sense of belonging. And yet, his kindness touched her heart. He asked nothing from her but her presence, and for the first time, she felt the burden of her responsibilities to her people lighten. But this connection, this bond that grew between them, was not without consequences. Her people expected her to marry within the tribe, to unite with a warrior who would strengthen their position. The chief, her father, had already arranged her marriage to a man of power, a man she could never love. Torn between the love she felt for Thomas and the duty to her tribe, Amara's heart ached. She could not bear the thought of abandoning her people, but at the same time, she could not deny the growing feelings she had for him. The pressure mounted as the day of her arranged wedding drew closer. The tribe was divided, some supporting her choice to marry for the good of the people, others urging her to follow her heart. The whispers grew louder, the eyes of the tribe ever watchful, waiting for her to make a decision. And then, in the dead of night, Amara made her choice. She left her people behind, the weight of tradition heavy on her shoulders, but her heart set on the life she could have with Thomas. As she walked away from the camp, the stars overhead seemed to guide her. With each step, she moved further from the life she had known and closer to the unknown future that awaited her. Little did she know, this decision would not only change her life, but the fate of her entire tribe. As the morning light broke across the land, a new chapter was about to begin, one that no one could have predicted. Amara's decision to leave her tribe behind was not an easy one. The weight of the tradition she had been raised with pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone, threatening to crush the fragile sense of peace she had found in Thomas. The night she left, she had not told a single soul, not even her closest friends in the tribe. She slipped away quietly under the cover of darkness, leaving behind the campfires that had once felt like home. As she made her way toward Thomas's ranch, the cold night air stung her skin, but her heart burned with a mixture of excitement and fear. She was not just leaving her family. She was stepping into a world she didn't fully understand. A world of settlers, cowboys, and a man who had once seemed so different from everything she had known. By the time the first light of dawn peeked over the horizon, Amara had crossed the distance to Thomas's ranch. He was already out, working with the horses, his back to her as she approached. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized that the moment had come. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with it. Thomas turned as he heard the familiar sound of hooves on the dirt road. His eyes widened as he saw Amara approaching. His expression softened, and he dropped the reins of the horse he had been holding, stepping toward her with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Amara," he said softly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I didn't think you'd come." She dismounted quickly, her feet hitting the ground with a sense of finality. "I had to," she replied, her voice steady, though the fear of the unknown still lingered in her chest. "I can't go back." Thomas stepped forward, taking her hands in his, a gentle warmth spreading between them. "Are you sure? Leaving your people, it's not something you can undo." "I know," Amara said, her gaze unwavering. "But I've thought about this for so long. I don't want to live in a world where I'm forced to be something I'm not. I can't be with someone I don't love just to please the tribe." There was a long silence as Thomas processed her words. Then he nodded. "Then we'll figure this out together. You're not alone anymore." But Amara could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, and she knew there was still much to be done. Her tribe wouldn't take kindly to her departure, and Thomas's ranch, though peaceful, was far from the safety of the tribe's land. The next few days passed in a blur of uncertainty. Thomas and Amara worked side by side, building their future together, but the shadow of her decision hung over them. Word had spread through the tribe about her leaving, and it wasn't long before her father sent a messenger to find her. When the messenger arrived, he brought with him not only words of anger from the chief, but also a warning. "The tribe has decided," the messenger said, his voice cold and firm. "Your actions have dishonored us. You will return, or there will be consequences." Amara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had known this was coming, but hearing it from someone who was so deeply tied to her past made it feel real, inescapable. Thomas stood by her side as she read the message. His jaw clenched, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle that hung at his side. "We won't let them take you," he said, his voice a low growl. Amara placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "No, Thomas. This is my fight now. You've done enough. I have to face them alone." He looked at her, his eyes filled with concern, but he didn't argue. The decision was hers, and he would support her no matter the outcome. As she prepared to leave for the tribal camp to face her father's wrath, Amara knew that this was the moment that would define the rest of her life. She had chosen love, but now she would have to prove that love was strong enough to survive the trials ahead. With each step she took toward her past, she felt the weight of the future pressing on her. The tribe had given her everything, but they could not give her the one thing she needed most: freedom. And in the world of cowboys and ranchers, Amara was about to discover just how far her choice would take her. Amara rode alone through the early morning mist, her heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to face. Her father's words still echoed in her mind, the threat of consequences hanging over her like a dark cloud. She had made her choice, and now she would have to prove to herself, and to her tribe, that her love for Thomas was worth everything. The wind whipped at her face as she steered her horse toward the tribal camp, the familiar landscape growing smaller with each passing mile. The journey was long, and the further she rode, the more she questioned her decision. But each time the doubts crept in, she remembered Thomas's words, "You're not alone anymore." That reassurance gave her the strength to keep moving forward. As she approached the camp, she could already see the figures of her people gathered around the central fire. Her father stood among them, his back straight and his posture commanding. He was a figure of authority, a man who had led their tribe through countless battles and had never once wavered in his duty. And now, his daughter was the one who had defied him. Amara's heart ached as she dismounted and walked toward him. The sounds of the camp seemed to quiet as she stepped into view, and the murmurs of the crowd grew louder with each step. Her father's eyes locked onto hers, filled with a mix of anger and disappointment. "You've come back," he said, his voice cold. "But you're not welcome here." His words stung, but Amara stood her ground. "I didn't come back to beg for your forgiveness, Father," she said, her voice steady. "I came to show you that there is more than one way to live, more than one path to honor." The chief's face hardened. "You dishonor yourself and our people by choosing a white man over your own. You've betrayed us." Amara felt the sting of his words, but she refused to back down. "I didn't betray anyone. I chose love. I chose the chance to live without fear, without hatred. Thomas is a man of honor. You don't see that because you're too focused on your traditions." Her father's gaze narrowed. You think your white man will protect you? You think he will stand by you when things get difficult? He will abandon you, just like all the others. Amara's chest tightened, but she held her ground. He won't abandon me. He has already shown me more respect and kindness than anyone in this tribe ever has. There was a long silence as the chief studied his daughter. Finally, he spoke. You are no longer my daughter. You have chosen your path, and it is not with us. The words were like a knife in Amara's heart. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it from her father was more painful than she could have imagined. But she would not let it break her. I may not be your daughter anymore, father, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I am still a part of this land. I will fight for my place here, just as I have fought for my love. The chief's face softened for a brief moment, but his expression quickly returned to one of resolve. Then you will fight alone. Amara turned away from him, her heart heavy but determined. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with it. She would not turn back. As she walked away from the camp, her mind raced. Her father's words echoed in her ears, but she knew that no matter what happened next, she could never go back to the life she had known. Her future was with Thomas, and she would fight for that future, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Thomas stood at the edge of the fields, waiting. The sun had started to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. He had been keeping watch, hoping against hope that Amara would return, but there was no sign of her. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of hooves in the distance. As he looked up, he saw Amara riding toward him, her expression one of quiet resolve. She dismounted and walked toward him without saying a word. Thomas reached out to her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of what had happened. Amara met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. I chose you, Thomas, she said, her voice firm. I chose our future together. And in that moment, everything changed. They had both chosen a life that was uncertain, that would come with its own struggles and hardships. But they had chosen each other, and that was all that mattered. As the days passed, life on the ranch grew more intense. Amara's decision to leave her tribe had sparked not only a personal journey but a ripple effect that now touched everyone in her life, from her father to the small, quiet world she was trying to build with Thomas. The ranch, once peaceful, had become the battleground for something far greater than cattle or land: loyalty, love, and survival. The news of her defection had spread quickly, reaching her father and the elders of the tribe. As expected, her decision had not been met with open arms. It was not just her father's anger that Amara feared. It was the quiet fury of her people, the ones who had raised her, who had taught her the traditions she had now turned her back on. Thomas, on the other hand, had remained calm, his patience a steady force as Amara wrestled with her guilt. He did not question her decision, but the weight of it was clear in his eyes. They had not spoken of her father's reaction since she had returned to the ranch, but the tension was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. One morning, as the sun rose high in the sky, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. It was a figure Amara instantly recognized, though she had hoped to never see him again. It was her brother, Koa, the son of her father, the one who had always been the pride of the tribe. He had come alone, his horse moving steadily through the dust, as if carrying the weight of something much heavier than the man himself. Amara felt her heart race. She had known this moment was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. Koa had always been the one who followed their father's wishes, the one who adhered to the old ways. She could see the anger in his eyes, even from a distance. He had come to bring her back, or at least to remind her of the consequences of her choice. As Koa approached, Thomas stepped forward, his expression unreadable but his body tense. He had seen the way Amara's face had tightened when she saw her brother. He had known this confrontation would come, but he was unsure what it would mean for them. Amara's loyalty to Thomas had not wavered, but she was still part of a world that would not easily let her go. Koa dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He looked at Thomas, then turned his gaze to Amara. You've made a mistake, Koa said, his voice cold. Father will never forgive you. You've dishonored him, and you've dishonored our people. Amara stood her ground, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. I didn't dishonor anyone, Koa. I chose to live my life. I chose Thomas. You chose a man who is not of our people, Koa shot back. And in doing so, you chose to turn your back on your own. Our people will never accept you now. The weight of his words struck her like a physical blow, but Amara refused to let him see her falter. I didn't choose against our people, Koa. I chose for myself. I chose love. Koa's expression hardened. Love doesn't change the facts, Amara. You've left our tribe. And when you leave, you forfeit everything. Your place among us, your family, your future. Amara's heart ached as she heard the words she had feared. Her brother, the one who had always been by her side, now saw her as an outsider. She glanced at Thomas, who was standing a few feet away, his gaze soft yet firm. Without his silent support, she wasn't sure how she would have made it this far. Koa followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing. You're with him now, he said, disgust creeping into his tone. You've chosen him over your own blood. You've chosen a stranger over your people. No, Amara replied, shaking her head. I haven't chosen anyone over anyone. I've chosen to live as I see fit. Koa took a step forward, his voice rising. Then you will live with the consequences of that choice. You will never be accepted again. He turned, his eyes flashing with finality. And neither will he. Thomas's eyes hardened at the threat, but Amara reached out and placed a hand on his arm. She had known this would come, but it didn't make it any easier. She had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences, whatever they may be. As Koa mounted his horse and turned to leave, Amara stood there, her heart heavy but resolute. She was not returning to the tribe. She had made her decision, and she would stand by it. Thomas, standing by her side, was more than just her love. He was her future, and for better or worse, they would face the world together. The next few weeks on the ranch were filled with an uneasy tension. Amara and Thomas had settled into a new routine, working together to maintain the land they now called home, but the shadow of Amara's decision loomed large. The ranch was not a place that easily accepted change, especially change that came with such a heavy cost. Word had spread throughout the region about Amara's choice, and while some were sympathetic, most were not. The isolation she and Thomas had once sought seemed almost impossible now. Every day, they found themselves waiting for something, anything, to happen. But it wasn't just the outsiders who were causing unrest. Amara felt the weight of her decision each time she looked into Thomas's eyes. His silent strength had been unwavering, but there were moments when she could see the doubt in his expression, the fear that he would lose her as she tried to reconcile her past with their present. As the days grew warmer, the tension finally erupted. One afternoon, as the sun began to sink low in the sky, a group of riders appeared on the horizon. At first, Amara thought it was just another group of travelers passing by, but as they drew closer, her heart sank. She recognized the leader of the group immediately, her father's second-in-command, a fierce and loyal warrior named Tarek. The others were unknown to her, but the look on their faces told her everything she needed to know. They had come to bring her back. Thomas noticed her reaction before she could say anything. He stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, his grip steady. You don't have to face them alone, he said softly. Amara shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I can't go back, Thomas. I've made my choice. Tarek and his men dismounted as they reached the ranch, their horses' hooves pounding against the dirt. Tarek's eyes were cold, and his gaze never wavered from Amara as he approached. You've dishonored the tribe, Amara, he said, his voice hard. Your father has sent us to bring you back. The consequences of your actions cannot go unpunished. Amara took a deep breath, standing tall as she faced him. I made my choice, Tarek. I'm not going back. I found my place here, with Thomas. Tarek's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. You will regret this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Your father has made it clear. If you do not return, the tribe will have no choice but to sever all ties with you. Then so be it, Amara replied, her voice steady despite the rising tide of emotion inside her. I've already lost everything, Tarek. The only thing I have left is the choice I made to live my life with Thomas. And I will not apologize for that. Tarek took a step closer, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Amara felt her heart race as the tension between them built. For a moment, she thought he might strike her down then and there, but instead, he simply stared at her with a mixture of disappointment and anger. You have no idea what you're throwing away, he said quietly. Your people will never forgive you, and neither will I. With that, Tarek turned and motioned for his men to mount their horses. The group rode off without another word, leaving Amara standing in the fading light, her heart pounding in her chest. As the sound of their hooves faded into the distance, Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of loss. She had not only defied her father and her tribe, but she had also severed the last remaining ties to her past. But Thomas was still there, standing by her side. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, she had made the right choice. Later that night, as they sat together by the fire, Thomas spoke quietly. "You did what you had to do, Amara. Don't ever doubt that." Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sadness. "I don't doubt it," she said softly. "But it's hard to let go of everything I've known." Thomas reached out and took her hand in his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to let go of everything. You just have to find a way to live in the world you've chosen. And you're not alone, Amara. You'll never be alone again." As the fire crackled between them, Amara leaned into him, finding comfort in his words, in the strength of his presence. She had made her choice, and though it had come with sacrifice, she knew that this was the life she had always wanted. A life where love, not duty, guided her decisions. And with Thomas by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were tense, as the quiet on the ranch was disrupted by the weight of Amara's decision. She had chosen Thomas, but the world she had left behind wasn't so easily forgotten. Her father's words still echoed in her mind, and the bitterness in Tarek's eyes haunted her. She had severed her ties with her tribe, but the cost of that severance was becoming more real with each passing day. Thomas noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor. Though they had built a life together in those few short weeks, the past lingered like a shadow that couldn't be ignored. Amara had put on a brave face for him, but he knew her heart was torn in two. There was a part of her that missed the familiarity of her people, the traditions she had been raised with, the sense of community and identity that had defined her existence. And yet, every time she looked at Thomas, the feeling of love, of belonging, settled deep inside her chest. She had made the right choice, but that didn't mean it was easy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge, the air was thick with tension. The wind carried a hint of something ominous, the promise of something neither of them could yet see. Amara stood outside, staring into the distance. The soft sound of hooves reached her ears, a familiar sound, but this time, it carried with it an unease she couldn't shake. Thomas, sensing her unease, stepped beside her. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Amara didn't answer immediately. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and something about the air that evening didn't sit right with her. Her father had made it clear that he would not let her go without a fight, but she hadn't expected this. From the direction of the horizon, a group of riders appeared. They were too many to be mere travelers, and their movement was purposeful, not casual. Amara's heart skipped a beat. "It's them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They've come." Thomas frowned, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle that rested on the porch. "Stay inside," he said, his tone firm. "I'll take care of this." But Amara didn't move. She had already faced the consequences of her choice, and she would not hide now. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice steady but filled with determination. Thomas hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Amara, this isn't your fight anymore," he said, trying to reason with her. "I won't let you face them." "You don't get to decide that for me," she replied, stepping closer. "I made my choice, and I'll face the consequences of it, no matter what." The riders drew closer, their figures becoming clearer in the dimming light. They were her father's men, led by Tarek, the same cold eyes that had stared at her with disdain. The group stopped at the edge of the ranch, their horses shifting restlessly. Tarek was the first to dismount, his expression hard as stone. His eyes locked onto Amara, his gaze filled with anger. "You've made your bed, Amara," he said, his voice cold. "Now you'll lie in it." Amara stood her ground, her chest rising and falling with each steady breath. "I won't go back with you, Tarek. You can threaten me all you want, but I won't return to a life that isn't mine anymore." Tarek's eyes narrowed, and the tension in the air grew thick. "You've chosen this man over your own people, and now you will pay the price for that." Thomas stepped forward, positioning himself between Amara and Tarek's men. His posture was calm, but there was a steel in his voice that made the air crackle. "You've made your threats, Tarek," Thomas said, his voice even. "But you'll have to go through me to take her." The standoff between the two men was intense, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. Amara could see the rage in Tarek's eyes, but she also saw something else, fear. He didn't know what to make of the man standing in his way. "I don't want to fight you," Thomas continued, his voice steady. "But if you want her back, you'll have to kill me first." Tarek's men shifted uneasily behind him, but Tarek himself was unyielding. "It's not about her, Thomas," he said, his voice harsh. "It's about the tribe. You're nothing but a stranger to us, and your presence here is a threat to everything we've built. We will not allow this." Amara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Enough, Tarek," she said, her tone commanding. "I made my choice. I won't go back. You can kill me, or you can leave, but this ends now." There was a long pause, the standoff growing more tense with each passing second. Finally, Tarek spoke, his voice quiet but filled with finality. "Then this is goodbye, Amara. You've made your choice, and now you will live with it." Without another word, he mounted his horse and signaled for his men to follow. Slowly, they turned and began to ride away, their presence fading into the night. As the sound of hooves grew distant, Amara let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It was over. The choice had been made, and she was finally free. Thomas stepped up beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "We'll face whatever comes next, together," he said, his voice soft but firm. And for the first time since she had made her decision, Amara felt a sense of peace. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone. The days after Tarek's departure passed quietly, but the stillness was deceptive. Amara and Thomas had faced down a challenge, but the world around them was far from forgiving. Amara had made her choice, but the path to peace was not as simple as she had hoped. The consequences of her defiance were still fresh, and there were many who would never accept her decision. Thomas had been her rock, a constant in a sea of uncertainty, but even he couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on them. The ranch, once a place of solace, had become a symbol of defiance. As the weeks went by, Amara noticed more and more unfamiliar faces passing by the edge of their land. At first, it was subtle, a glance, a whisper, but soon, the numbers grew. It seemed her father had not given up on his daughter. He had sent his warriors to keep watch, to make sure she did not forget the cost of leaving. Every day, Amara felt their eyes on her. Every rustle in the wind, every creak of the trees, seemed to signal their presence, waiting for her to falter. It wasn't just the warriors. Amara could sense the unease growing in the local community as well. Some people had begun to avoid her, turning their backs when she passed, as though her presence was a threat to their own peace. But Thomas remained steadfast, always by her side, always ready to face whatever came next. One evening, as the sky began to darken and the air turned cooler, Amara stood on the porch of their small home, looking out over the horizon. She could feel the familiar tension creeping up again. The riders were coming. She had known they would return, and now it was time to face them once more. Thomas joined her on the porch, his presence like a shield against the growing anxiety. "We've been ready for this," he said quietly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Amara nodded, her eyes scanning the distance as the riders grew closer. There were more of them this time, at least a dozen. They rode in a loose formation, their faces covered by the shadows of their hoods, but Amara could see the determination in their movements. Her father had sent them again, but this time, they weren't just here to intimidate. This was no simple threat. The tension between them was palpable. "They're coming for you," Thomas said, his voice hard. "I won't let them take you, Amara." But she shook her head, her expression calm despite the storm raging inside. "You don't have to fight for me, Thomas. I won't let them tear us apart. We've made our choice." As the riders neared the ranch, Amara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never wanted this conflict, but she knew that this was the reality she had to face. The choices she made had consequences, and now it was time to deal with them. The riders stopped at the edge of the ranch, dismounting with swift, practiced movements. Tarek was at the front once again, his eyes cold and filled with determination. Amara, he said, his voice carrying across the distance. You've made your choice, and now you will face the consequences. Thomas stepped forward, positioning himself between Amara and the approaching warriors. His stance was firm, his gaze unwavering. I won't let you take her, he said, his voice low but filled with authority. Tarek's eyes flickered with contempt, but he did not move. You don't have a say in this, Thomas, he replied. This is not your fight. Amara stepped forward, standing beside Thomas. It's my fight. Tarek, she said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. I chose this life, and I won't go back. You can't take me from him. The warriors shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Amara and Tarek. There was a moment of silence, the air thick with tension, before Tarek spoke again. You've betrayed us, Amara. You've turned your back on your own people. You will never find peace in this world. Amara's heart clenched, but she did not let his words break. I didn't betray anyone, Tarek, she said firmly. I chose love, and that's something none of you can take from me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind seemed to hold its breath, and the world around them seemed to pause in anticipation. Then, Tarek gave a small, bitter laugh. Love, he spat. You call this love? This man. You've made a fool of yourself. Amara stepped forward again, her voice rising. I may be a fool in your eyes, but I'm not going to let you make me feel ashamed of my choice. I love him, and that's enough for me. The riders seemed to shift uneasily, unsure of how to respond. Finally, Tarek's gaze softened, but only slightly. This isn't over, Amara, he said, his voice low and final. You will pay for this. Your people will not forget what you've done. With that, he turned and mounted his horse. His men followed, but not before casting one last look at the couple standing on the porch. As the sound of hooves faded into the distance, Amara let out a long, steady breath. It was over, for now, but she knew that their lives would never be the same. They had chosen each other, and no matter what the future held, they would face it together. Weeks passed, and though the immediate threat had dissipated, the undercurrent of tension remained in the air. Amara and Thomas had built a life for themselves on the ranch, one that felt both peaceful and fragile, a delicate balance between the past they could never return to and the future they were trying to carve out together. But the consequences of Amara's choice were far from over. It was clear now that her father's anger was not something that could simply be ignored. Rumors of her defiance had spread, and with it, the weight of 100 years of tradition came crashing down on her. Despite the quiet, Amara felt the eyes of her people still on her, the harsh whispers of judgment carried on the wind. She had left the tribe. She had chosen love. And for that, she had to face what was coming. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the fields, the ground trembled slightly under the hooves of a dozen horses. Amara felt a tight knot form. In her stomach, she could sense it, the shift in the air, the feeling of someone closing in. Thomas looked up from his work with the cattle, sensing the change in her demeanor. Without a word, he dropped his tools and walked toward her. They're coming again, Amara said quietly, her eyes scanning the distance. Thomas nodded, his face set in a grim expression. Stay inside, he said, his tone firm. I'll handle this. But Amara didn't move. She wasn't about to hide. She had made her choice, and now it was time to face whatever came next. No, she said firmly, standing tall. This is my fight, too. I'm not running from it anymore. The riders approached, their shadows stretching long and ominous as they neared the ranch. Amara's heart raced as she recognized the leader of the group, Tarek, once again. His steely eyes met hers as he drew closer, and she could see the anger and resolve etched on his face. He dismounted, followed by the rest of the riders, who spread out in a semicircle, trapping her and Thomas between them. Tarek's gaze was cold as he looked at Amara. You're still here, he said, his voice thick with disdain. I should have known you'd be foolish enough to defy us. Amara stood her ground, her back straight and her expression unwavering. I haven't defied anyone, Tarek. I've made my choice. I chose love, and I will not apologize for that. Tarek's eyes narrowed. You think your choice means something? You've abandoned your family, your tribe, your people. And for what? A man who doesn't belong here. Thomas stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Amara. She chose what she believed in. Tarek, he said, his voice low but firm. You can't change that. Tarek sneered, his eyes flicking to Thomas. You don't understand, do you? This isn't just about her. This is about the future of our people. Her defection has consequences. We can't let that go unpunished. Amara felt a chill run down her spine at his words, but she refused to flinch. Punish me if you must, she said, her voice steady. But I will not go back. I won't return to a life where I'm not free to choose my own path. Tarek stepped forward, his face inches from hers. You think your choices don't matter? He growled. You think you can just walk away from everything you've ever known and live happily ever after with this, man? You will never be accepted by your people again, Amara. We'll make sure of it. Amara's chest tightened, but she did not back down. I don't need your approval, Tarek, she said, her voice firm. I don't need anyone's approval. I've chosen this life, and I will fight for it. Tarek hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. For the first time, doubt flickered in his expression, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. You've made your choice, he said, his voice cold. And now, we will make ours. He turned to his men, and with a single command, they mounted their horses and began to ride away, leaving Amara and Thomas standing in the fading light. As the sound of hooves faded into the distance, Amara exhaled, the weight of the moment settling over her. She had faced down her past, and now she had to look ahead. But despite the relief, there was a lingering uncertainty in her heart. Tarek's words had stung. Her people had not forgotten her, and they never would. But in that moment, standing beside Thomas, Amara knew one thing for sure. She had made the right choice. It's over, Thomas said softly, his voice filled with quiet reassurance. Amara nodded, but her thoughts were far from settled. It's never truly over, she replied. But it will be okay. We'll make it okay. Together. Amara and Thomas stood together as the last echoes of the riders faded into the night. The ranch, now quiet once more, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. The wind stirred the dry grass at their feet, but the world around them was still. It felt like the calm before a storm, and for the first time since Amara had made her decision, she truly understood the weight of the choice she had made. It wasn't just about leaving her tribe or choosing Thomas. It was about what came next. And what came next, she knew, wouldn't be easy. In the days that followed, the quiet tension continued to hang over them. Thomas was patient, always by her side, supporting her, but Amara could feel the restlessness inside her. She had made her choice, but was it the right one? Could love truly overcome everything, every tradition, every expectation, every part of her past? One evening, as the sun set low behind the hills, Amara stood outside, staring at the horizon, feeling the weight of the decision she had made. Thomas joined her, his presence grounding her like the earth beneath their feet. You're still thinking about it, aren't you? He asked, his voice soft but understanding. Amara turned to him, her heart heavy. I can't help it. I left everything behind. I chose a life with you, but what if it's not enough? What if I'm wrong? Thomas took her hand in his touch warm and steady. Amara, there's no right or wrong choice here. There's just what feels true to you. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward. And we'll move forward together. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she felt peace settle within her. She had chosen him, not just because of love, but because of the life they could build together, free from the constraints of the past. She had chosen to be free. You're right, she said softly, her voice full of conviction. I can't keep looking back. I made my choice, and I'll live with it. With you. Days turned into weeks, and though the world around them remained uncertain, Amara felt something shift inside her. She was no longer a girl torn between two worlds. She was a woman, standing tall in the life she had chosen. Her love for Thomas had given her a new sense of purpose, a new sense of self. And while the scars of her past would always remain, they were no longer the chains that bound her. One morning, as Amara and Thomas worked side by side on the ranch, something unexpected happened. A rider appeared on the horizon. At first, they both thought it was just another stranger passing through, but as the figure grew closer, Amara's heart skipped a beat. It was her father. Thomas could see the tension in Amara's body, and he stepped closer to her, his presence a reminder that she was not alone. Her father dismounted slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Amara's breath caught in her throat, and she felt the weight of her father's gaze on her. Amara, he said, his voice low. I've come to speak with you. She nodded, her heart racing. What is it, father? The old chief took a deep breath before speaking again, his voice softer this time. I've heard the whispers, Amara, and I've seen the choices you've made. You've broken from the tribe, and yet, I see now that you've made a life for yourself here. He glanced at Thomas, his eyes wary but not hostile. It's not the life I would have chosen for you, but perhaps it's the life you were meant to have. Amara felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a mixture of relief and fear. This was the moment she had both feared and hoped for. Her father had come to accept her choice, but what did it mean for the future? Does this mean, you forgive me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father sighed, the weight of years of tradition heavy in the lines of his face. I don't know if I can ever fully understand your decision, Amara, but I've seen how you fought for it. And that's enough. I may not agree with you, but you've chosen your path. And I'll respect that. Thomas stepped forward, his voice steady. Thank you, he said, his gratitude clear. I know this wasn't easy for you. Her father nodded, his eyes softening for the first time since he had arrived. It's not easy for any father to watch his child leave the world he's known. But I see now that you've made a life here. And I can't ask for more than that. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a quiet acceptance, a moment where two worlds, Amara's past and her future, had finally found some common ground. As her father turned to leave, he paused for a moment and glanced back at her. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand you, Amara, but I do know this. Your choices are yours to make, and I will not stand in your way. With that, he mounted his horse and rode off into the distance, leaving Amara and Thomas standing together, a silent understanding between them. Amara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment lift from her shoulders. It's over, she said softly. It's really over. Thomas smiled at her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. No, Amara. It's just beginning. And, as they stood there, watching the sun set over the ranch they had built together, Amara knew, deep down, that no matter what came next, she had found her place in the world. A place where love, not tradition, would always guide her. And with Thomas by her side, she was ready to face whatever the future held.